In 30 years of the Oprah Show history, Oprah had never seen a billionaire break down and cry like a child. But when she asked Elon Musk about his father, the cameras stopped. The man who conquered space was finally facing the one place he'd never traveled, his own heart. This is the story of the most powerful interview in television history, where the world's richest man learned that the greatest journey isn't to Mars, it's to the place where healing begins. The studio lights dimmed to their signature warm glow as Oprah settled into her iconic chair, the one where presidents had confessed their deepest regrets and movie stars had revealed their most guarded secrets. The familiar weight of thousands of untold stories seemed to hang in the air, each conversation that had happened in this sacred space adding to its power to transform lives. Across from her sat Elon Musk, fidgeting with his phone, checking Tesla stock prices, SpaceX launch schedules, and Twitter notifications even in these final moments before they went live. His leg bounced nervously, a tell that betrayed the anxiety he tried so hard to mask with technological distractions. "We're rolling in 30 seconds, the floor director announced, and Oprah watched as Elon's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. She'd interviewed enough powerful men to recognize the armor they wore into her studio, the carefully constructed walls that kept vulnerability at bay. But today felt different. Today, Elon had brought something with him that he'd never carried into any boardroom or press conference. In his jacket pocket was a small hospital bracelet, still bearing the smell of antiseptic and new life. His son's bracelet from the night everything changed. "And we're live and The red light blinked on, and Oprah's face transformed into the warm, welcoming expression that had become synonymous with truth-telling and healing for millions of viewers around the world. "Welcome back to the Oprah Show. I'm here with Elon Musk, the man behind Tesla, SpaceX, and some of the most revolutionary technology of our time." She paused, studying his face with the intuition that had made her America's most trusted interviewer. "But today we're not here to talk about rockets or electric cars. Today we're here to talk about something far more complex, the human heart." Elon shifted in his chair, his thumb still unconsciously reaching for his phone before stopping himself. That's actually much more complicated than rocket science, Oprah."
Is it?
Oprah leaned forward slightly, her voice carrying that gentle insistence that had coaxed confessions from the most guarded souls. "Because I have a theory, Elon. I think sometimes the people who reach the highest, who push the furthest boundaries, are the ones running from something they can't engineer their way out of." Rehook. What Oprah didn't know was that she was about to witness the moment when a man who'd spent $44 billion buying Twitter to control the conversation was about to lose control of his own words. The silence stretched between them for what felt like an eternity but was only 3 seconds. 3 seconds that the editing team would later mark as the moment the interview changed from promotion to revelation. "You want to know what I'm running from?" Elon's voice was quieter now, stripped of the confident bravado that characterized his public appearances. "I'm running from a 9-year-old boy in Pretoria who was told he was worthless." Oprah's eyes widened slightly, not with surprise, but with recognition. She'd heard this story before, in different words from different guests, but the pain was always the same. The successful adults, still carrying the wounded child inside. "Tell me about that boy," she said softly, her voice carrying the same gentle authority that had coaxed confessions from world leaders and ordinary people alike, the tone that somehow made the most guarded souls feel safe enough to lower their defenses. Elon's hand moved instinctively to his pocket, touching the hospital bracelet through the fabric like a prayer bead, a tangible reminder of what had changed everything. His name was Elon Reeve Musk, and he lived in a house where the sound of breaking glass was more common than laughter. His father, Elon paused, swallowing hard against decades of buried pain. His father was brilliant, an engineer, a pilot, an adventurer. But he was also the kind of man who could look at his own son and see only disappointment reflected back at him. The studio audience was completely silent now, 300 people holding their breath as they watched one of the world's most powerful men strip away decades of carefully constructed defenses. "What did he say to you?" Oprah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're worthless. You'll never amount to anything." But it wasn't said in anger, Oprah. That's what made it worse. It was said as fact. Clinical, like he was diagnosing a mechanical failure. Elon's eyes were focused somewhere beyond the cameras, somewhere in the past, where a small boy sat alone, reading science fiction books, and dreaming of worlds where children didn't have to hear such things. And that boy believed him? That boy spent the next 4 decades trying to prove him wrong. Elon finally looked directly at Oprah, and she could see the shimmer of tears he was fighting to control. Every company I built, every rocket I launched, every impossible thing I accomplished, it was all an argument with a ghost, proof that I wasn't worthless. Rehook. But Oprah was about to discover that all of Elon's achievements, all his billions, all his revolutionary technology, couldn't fill the hole left by 3 words from his father. You said was, Oprah noted gently. You're speaking in past tense. What changed? This was the moment Elon reached into his pocket and pulled out the small hospital bracelet, holding it between his fingers like a talisman, like the most precious artifact in all his collection of revolutionary technologies. The camera zoomed in, capturing the tiny plastic band that seemed so insignificant compared to the rockets and factories and global empires. Elon commanded, yet somehow contained more power than any of his inventions. 3 months ago, I became a father again. My 11th child, but the first one born, after I finally understood something. He held up the bracelet, and Oprah could see his hands trembling slightly. When they placed him in my arms, this tiny perfect person who'd done nothing but exist, I realized something that 47 years of therapy couldn't teach me. What was that? That worth isn't earned. It's inherent. This little boy didn't have to build rockets, or start companies, or prove anything to anyone. He was enough just because he was here. Elon's voice cracked on the last word, and a single tear escaped despite his efforts to maintain composure. The audience was completely still, some dabbing at their own eyes as they watched this powerful man rediscover his own humanity through fatherhood. And in that moment, Elon continued, his voice growing stronger, as if speaking these truths was finally setting him free from decades of emotional imprisonment. I finally forgave that 9-year-old boy in Pretoria. I forgave him for believing those words. I forgave him for spending his whole life trying to be worthy of love that should have been unconditional from the beginning. I forgave him for thinking he had to earn what should have been freely given. Oprah leaned back in her chair, a smile spreading across her face. Not the polite smile of television, but the genuine expression of someone who just witnessed a miracle. That's beautiful, Elon. But I have to ask, what about your father? What about Errol? The mention of his father's name caused Elon's expression to shift, and Oprah could see him wrestling with something internal, some final barrier he was deciding whether to cross. That's the hardest part, Oprah. Because 3 days after my son was born, I did something I hadn't done in 5 years. I called my father. Rehook. What happened in that phone call would change not just Elon's relationship with his past, but his entire vision for the future. I told him about the baby, Elon continued, his voice growing stronger now, as if speaking the truth was giving him energy rather than depleting it. And then I said something I'd never said before. I said, Dad, I forgive you. How did he respond? He cried. Elon shook his head, as if still processing the memory. 77 years old, and he cried like that 9-year-old boy I used to be. He said, I'm sorry, son. I was wrong. You were never worthless. I was just so afraid you'd end up like me. Bitter and alone, that I tried to toughen you up. But I went too far. Oprah reached across and touched Elon's hand gently. And how did that feel? Overwhelming. For 47 years, I'd been having an argument with someone who wasn't even fighting back anymore. He'd been carrying his own pain, his own father's voice telling him he wasn't good enough. We were both prisoners of the same cycle. The camera captured the moment perfectly. 2 hands, one belonging to America's most beloved interviewer, the other to the world's richest man, connected by something more valuable than money or fame, genuine human understanding. But here's what I really want to understand, Oprah said, leaning forward with the curiosity that had driven her career. You've talked about Mars for years, about making humanity a multi-planetary species. Was that dream born from this pain? Elon was quiet for a long moment, considering the question with the same intensity he brought to engineering problems. You know, I always gave scientific reasons, backup planets, species survival, advancing human civilization, but if I'm being completely honest, he paused, touching the hospital bracelet again. Mars was far enough away that my father's voice couldn't follow me there. And now I realize I don't need to go to Mars to find home. Home isn't a place, Oprah. It's a feeling. It's knowing you're enough, exactly as you are. It's holding your child and promising them something you never received, unconditional love. Rehook. But Oprah wasn't finished. She was about to ask the question that would reveal the true cost of Elon's emotional armor. Elon, I have to ask about your other children. You have 10 other kids from previous relationships. How does this realization affect your relationship with them? This question hit Elon like a physical blow. His composure, which had been carefully maintained throughout the interview, finally cracked completely. He put his face in his hands and began to sob. Not the careful tears of a man trying to maintain his image, but the deep, body-shaking sobs of someone releasing decades of suppressed emotion. The studio was dead silent, except for the sound of Elon's crying. The cameras kept rolling, but everyone, the crew, the audience, even Oprah, seemed to understand they were witnessing something sacred, something that transcended entertainment. I failed them, Elon whispered through his tears, each word carrying the weight of regret that no amount of success could ever balance. I gave them everything except the one thing they needed, a father who was present, a father who wasn't constantly trying to prove his worth to a ghost. I thought providing for their future was the same as being present for their childhood. I was wrong. Oprah moved to the edge of her chair, her own eyes filling with tears. But you can change that now. Can I? Elon looked up, his face streaked with tears, looking more vulnerable than any billionaire had ever appeared on television. Some of them are adults now. I missed their childhoods. I was in factories and conference rooms and rocket facilities, building a future I thought would make them proud, but I wasn't there for their present. What have you told them? I've called each one. I've apologized. I've told them that I'm learning to be a different kind of father, a different kind of man. Some of them were angry. Some of them cried, but they all said the same thing. We just want you to be there, Dad. We don't need you to be perfect. We just need you to be present. The rawness of the moment was palpable. This wasn't the polished, media-trained Elon Musk the world was used to seeing. This was a father, a son, a human being stripped of all pretense, speaking from a place of pure vulnerability. And are you present now? Oprah asked, her question carrying both hope and gentle challenge, the kind of loving accountability that only true friends dare to offer. Elon wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, a gesture so simple and human it seemed to transform him from icon to individual, from billionaire to father. I'm trying. Last week my daughter Nevada, she's 14 now, asked me to help with her science project. In the old days I would have sent an assistant or hired a tutor or found some way to engineer a solution from a distance. But I sat with her for 3 hours, and we built this volcano that barely worked, and He smiled through his tears, the expression of a man discovering joy in the ordinary. It was the best 3 hours I'd spent in years. Because she didn't care that I was Elon Musk. She just cared that I was her dad. Rehook. The interview was approaching its most powerful moment, when Oprah would ask the question that revealed the true transformation in Elon's priorities. Elon, you've revolutionized electric vehicles, private space exploration, social media. You're working on brain implants and tunnel systems. But sitting here today, what feels like your most important work? Elon was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was clearer than it had been all day. Breaking the cycle, making sure that the voices my children hear are different from the ones I heard. Teaching them that their worth isn't tied to their achievements, that they're enough just because they exist. And for yourself? Learning to believe that about myself too. He held up the hospital bracelet one more time. This little piece of plastic taught me more about value than all my companies combined. It represents a person who's worth everything to me. Not because of what he might accomplish someday, but because of who he is right now. Oprah nodded slowly, recognizing the profound shift she was witnessing. So when you look toward the future now, what do you see? I still see Mars, Oprah. I still believe we need to become a multi-planetary species. But the reason has changed. It's not about escape anymore. It's about expansion. It's about creating a future where children, all children, have infinite possibilities, where they never have to choose between reaching for the stars and feeling grounded in love. And your message to that 9-year-old boy in Pretoria? Elon closed his eyes for a moment, and when he opened them, they were clear and peaceful. I'd tell him that he was always enough, that the breaking glass and the harsh words were never about him, that one day he'd hold his own son and understand what unconditional love actually feels like, and that when that day came, all the pain would finally make sense. Not because it was necessary, but because it made him appreciate the healing when it finally arrived. The studio erupted in spontaneous applause, but it wasn't the polite clapping of a typical talk show audience. It was the deep, sustained applause of people who had witnessed genuine transformation, real healing happening in real time. As the applause died down, Oprah leaned forward one last time. Elon, what do you want people to take away from our conversation today? That success and significance are two different things. I've been successful for years, but I only became significant when I learned to love without conditions and be present without agenda. The greatest technology isn't artificial intelligence or rocket propulsion. It's human connection. It's the courage to be vulnerable, to admit when you're broken, and to let other people help you heal. He paused, looking directly into the camera, speaking not to the millions who would watch, but to every person who'd ever felt worthless, every parent trying to break generational cycles, every child still waiting for approval that should never have been conditional. And if you're watching this as a parent, please remember, your children don't need you to be perfect. They don't need you to conquer space or build empires or accumulate wealth. They just need you to be there. They need to know they're enough, exactly as they are. No achievements required. Rehook. As the interview drew to a close, Elon would make one final revelation that would change how the world understood his true mission. Before we finish, Oprah said, I have to ask about Mars one more time. When you finally get there, what will that moment mean to you? Elon smiled, not the confident smirk he wore in press conferences, but a gentle, peaceful expression. It will mean that a species that almost lost one of its children to worthlessness managed to reach another world anyway. It will mean that love really can transcend gravity, that healing really can happen, and that sometimes the longest journey is the one that brings you home to yourself. He pulled out his phone, the same device he'd been checking obsessively at the beginning of the interview, and for the first time in the hour they'd been talking, he turned it off completely. But right now, Mars can wait. Tonight is bath time. The studio erupted in laughter and applause as the credits began to roll, but the cameras kept running for a few more seconds, capturing Elon carefully placing his son's hospital bracelet back in his pocket, right over his heart. Later, when the ratings came in, this would be declared the most watched episode in Oprah Show history. It would win Emmy Awards and Peabody Awards, and be studied in journalism schools for decades. But none of that mattered to the man who walked out of that studio that day. What mattered was that for the first time in his life, Elon Musk was going home, not to a mansion or a factory or a launch pad, but to the simple revolutionary act of being present for the people who needed him most. The interview ended, but the healing was just beginning. And somewhere in South Africa, a 77-year-old man named Elon Musk watched his son on television and finally understood that it's never too late to say the words that matter most. I'm proud of you, and you were always enough. The cameras stopped rolling, but the conversation between fathers and children, between past and present, between who we were and who we're becoming, continued long into the night and beyond, rippling outward in ways that no rocket ever could, touching hearts in ways that no technology ever would, proving that sometimes the most important revolutions happen not in the world around us, but in the space between where we've been and where we're brave enough to go.